So many people want to know what CELTA is because they study to be teachers in their country, but they don't know if they should also do CELTA. Yes,
Sure.
no, is it a thing?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I worked for a long time at Warwick University, so with a lot of people who came with, teaching qualifications and years' experience often, and they say, "What, you can just learn to be a teacher in 4 weeks. That's ridiculous. I studied for 5 years, and
Yeah.
of course, you cannot learn in 4 weeks what you can learn in 5 years. Of course, you can't. Um, you know, so I always sort of say to people, CELTA is kind of like a first aid kit, not a medical degree. It gives you basic tools that you need to take into the classroom to start you off. I think it's an initial teacher training qualification, and Cambridge say it is. They don't try and pretend anything different. Delta's the one that's really to take you further. But I do think, I mean, the issue is, I suppose, that it's very well recognised generally if you want to work outside of your country. So if you're in Argentina and you want to be a teacher, I'm guessing you have to have a 5-year degree or a 4-year degree probably. Um, but if you want to work in a private language school, they're probably going to say, we'd like you to have something. Or they might say that.
Yeah.
And if you go and work in another country, if you want to go work in the States or in England or in Spain or wherever else, they'll definitely say, in a private language school, they'll definitely say to you, we'd like you to have CELTA.
And well, some people also asked if CELTA is like accepted everywhere around the world.
Pretty much, I'd say. I mean, it's certainly very well recognised. I guess, again, it depends on what you want to do. So, for example, if I wanted to go and work, in Argentina in a state school teaching English, they
Yeah.
probably would say, no, you need a 5-year degree from, a university in Argentina. And so I guess it's all about horses for courses. But if you want to go and work in a private language school, wherever that may be, then CELTA, yeah, is very well recognised. And I do think it's a really good qualification. I really believe in it. But I think one of the big reasons why people take it is because it's kind of a passport to, it opens a lot of doors in a lot of other countries.
I mean, there are other teaching qualifications. Why did you decide to become a CELTA tutor yourself?
That's a really good question. I guess it's perhaps about, it's often I think with our industry, and maybe that's true of everything, it's kind of where you end up at a particular time, isn't it? I was working in various private language schools in different places, and kind of like the idea of, I'm quite a proactive kind of person, so I started doing little bits of workshops for, especially after I did my Delta, I started doing workshops for other teachers in the schools where I was working. I was quite lucky. I was in schools that were supportive. And then I landed up in a college where they did CELTA as well. And they said, we're looking for some more trainers. Does anybody want to do it? I said, yes, please. And so I was lucky and I got trained up. And that was the reason. And then, as I say, later on, moved to Warwick, where I was also doing CELTA, Warwick University, but working on the MAT cell there. And so doing a different kind of training, I suppose. And that was interesting too. It's nice to do different stuff.
As a tutor, what do you think is the hardest part of CELTA?
That's really interesting. I mean, so maybe I should throw that back at you. If you did your CELTA, what was the hardest part for you?
Um, I have to say, I really, really enjoyed my CELTA, so I didn't really like struggle with everything. Some
Mm-hmm.
things were easier than others. I remember that the assignments, I mean, they were not difficult, but I mean, I was just starting out. It was even before I started teaching training college here in Argentina. So I remember that maybe I wrote something, and I, planned lessons, and then with those assignments, I realized that maybe there were so many other things I could be doing, or that I could do the same thing in so many different ways. And I remember I had to resubmit some assignments, and it was not difficult, but I remember that there was a moment when I said, wait, I mean, I have to reconsider everything. So I remember that was one of the best and worst, let's say, not worst, but just like the most challenging parts
Okay.
of set, definitely.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's quite interesting if you see people who are coming as to CELTA as native speakers, English native speakers is a difficult thing to say, but people whose first language is English, let's say. Um, those people often haven't got a clue about English grammar. So, they very often don't know what a preposition is. They probably know what a noun and a verb and an adjective is. Adverbs, maybe not so. Prepositions, articles, what the present perfect is, they don't know. And they don't know what's difficult. So, you look at articles, at the two little words, how difficult are they?
Yeah.
Easy. No, they're not easy. They're really, really, really hard. And as a person whose first language is English, you don't realise that unless you've done a lot of other learning of languages, So
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that often people who are English speakers find. And then the other half of the people, and it is about worldwide, it's about half and half, people who think first language is English and people whose first language isn't, who do the course. And obviously it depends on the country as well, but back worldwide, it's about half and half. And the people who've learned English as a second language, they often do know that stuff very well. And so, that kind of isn't such a problem. But particularly if they've come from a background of teaching that's more lecture-like, I'm going to tell you about that grammar, or I'll tell you about it, then that can be a sort of an issue. So I think that what people find difficult is different depending on, depending on those different people. But often presenting language. I've got a new video I made this week about presenting language and some tips for it, because I think that's often a problem, because you're trying to tell people, especially if you've written a great big lesson plan, you've spent a lot of time on it, you're nodding, I'm sure you remember this. You put a lot of effort into it and you've learnt all this stuff and you think, I've got to tell them everything. And then lessons can end up being very teacher-centred and confusing for the learners. So I think those things are often problematic for people, whereas skills stuff is often less of a problem.
Yeah, maybe because it depends more on the learners themselves too.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's interesting, I think often people, you don't necessarily always realise what's difficult as a novice teacher. So, for example, you might take in some kind of discussion task to an upper intermediate class, and they have they chat because they can, and they have a lovely time and they enjoy the discussion, and arguably, they've developed their fluency. But really, then I think as a more experienced teacher, especially when you do Delta and that sort of thing, you start looking back and thinking, well, did they really learn anything in that 20 minutes? They had a nice time and they used their English, and that's okay. But realistically, they could, go online and chat to somebody and use their English for 20 minutes. And, what did I, as a teacher who will be paid for teaching them, what did I give them that was valuable, more valuable than just having a chat? And I think, it's that sort of thing that often you dig deeper into as you go forward in your teaching career, maybe.
And well, people want to know what the hardest part is, but they also want to know if you have tips to get ready.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and again, what it was interesting, I think what we talked about before about what people find difficult
Yeah.
is that's, that's part of the answer to the question about what you need to prepare. So when you go for a CELTA course, when you apply, you'll already have to do, the application process, as you know, is, quite intense. You have to do quite a lot of work for it.
Yeah.
So there's already tests about explaining how do you explain language to learners and how you'd explain the difference between, something like, I don't know, I saw him last week and I've seen him
Uh,
this morning or
right.
whatever.
Long
Um,
explanation and the dialogue, and my CELTA tutor was like, "Why would you do this? I mean, just get all, you know." I
yeah,
remember that.
yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, that's the other thing, isn't it? I think perhaps when you're going into it, you're not even sure what's required, and you
Yeah.
feel as if the more that you give, probably, the better. And that's not necessarily the case. The simpler really is the better. So, how do you explain blink to somebody? Well, it's when you close both of your eyes at the same time, simultaneously. No, it's that,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think that's, especially, and people often when they've come from quite an academic background, people, and which is often the case, people have done degrees or further study, and you feel as if it's got teaching, has to be an academic thing, whereas a language is definitely skills based things you need to learn to do it. So in terms of preparation, I'd say the things that I kind of recommend to people is, one, if you don't know the grammar, you need to. Um, if you're lucky enough to have learnt it yourself, then great, you probably already do. If not, then you really need to, and think about what's difficult for learners. So that's kind of the first course that I developed because I knew it was a problem.
Yeah.
The second thing I think is lesson planning. Often takes people a lot of time, and it's the sort of thing that, of course, the grammar not so much. Now, there's nowhere really on CELTA where we'll say we'll teach you all of the grammar. You kind of learn bits and pieces as you go along, but it's expected already.
Yeah.
Lesson planning's a bit different. Of course, it's taught on the course, but I think if you've got an idea beforehand of what's going to be expected, it helps you to kind of hit the ground running. So if you've got an idea of what aims are, that they answer the question why are you doing this, not what are you doing. If you've got an idea of how lessons might be staged and the various frameworks, if you've got some preparation for that, I think that helps. I think a lot of stuff about classroom management. I've got quite a large resource on my site called the CELTA Toolkit, which is completely free. It's got lots of videos on, and things like giving instructions and
Yeah.
not talking too much, getting the learners to talk.
Yeah.
All of this stuff. Again, this is all taught on the CELTA. It's not things that aren't taught to you.
Yeah.
But if you can get some kind of ideas beforehand, I think that helps probably. I mean, again, maybe throw it back to you. So if you were doing the same thing again, what would you say you would have liked to have known or be better prepared for beforehand?
I have to say, and I mean, I'm being 100% honest. I watched every single one of your videos. So
Right.
I had
Thank you.
I had no idea what an ICQ was, for example. I had no idea what that was. Now,
You
CELTA
wouldn't. No.
1, we're going to use ICQs. Do you know what that is? I was like, yes, I do know. I remember there were so many terms and so many things. I mean, that we had to use in our lessons, or that we had to pay attention to when we conducted all those language analysis thingies and stuff. I knew exactly what to do, thanks to all your videos, things you
That's
share.
really nice to
Yeah,
hear. That's really nice to hear. And I think actually, I mean, that's interesting because obviously not many people, not many trainees get as prepared as you clearly did. Um, but I think that you're right that that idea, because there's so much new
yeah,
stuff that's thrown at you. What's an ICQ? What's a CCQ? How do you give instructions? What's a stage aim? What's an interaction pattern? What's an intransitive verb? There's so much new stuff coming at you all the time.
yeah,
And so I think that perhaps it often it's quite overwhelming at the beginning. Actually, not just at the beginning. It's an overwhelming experience for a lot of people, especially on a 4-week course. And so having some idea of those things beforehand does help. And of course, there is every CELTA centre will give people a preparation task beforehand. It's a long 50-page PDF that has exercises that you can go through. But my experience is that people, some people with the best will in the world do go through it, and some people don't. And you can tell people this is going to be a lot of work. It is going to be overwhelming. There is going to be a lot of new information. And people kind of go, yeah. And they believe you. It's not they don't believe you. They just don't get. I always say it's like childbirth. People can tell you it's going to hurt. And you go, yeah, I know it's going to hurt. But it's not till you're in the middle of it that you're going, oh my word, it really, really, really hurts.
yeah,
And then it's too late. So, and you can't really prepare for that, but you can prepare for CELTA. So yeah, I think all of anything you can do beforehand, the more you can get ready, as you clearly did, then the better.
yeah. Especially, I mean, if you can watch videos or read maybe blog posts connected to CELTA, because, for example, in teacher training college, I mean, different teacher training colleges here and in other countries, they work differently, they have different teachers, but there are some things that you see in a different way or that you use them in a different way too. So yeah, I think that's a key.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, CELTA's a really interesting course, I think, because, I mean, I do think, I think it's a really valuable learning experience. I like the setup of it, and I've taught on lots of different courses, but what I think is very valuable is that there's two things really. One is that the theory and the practice are really intermeshed. So something that people often do feel, I mean, about prepare, it is important to prepare before, the more the better, but there's an element of, yeah, okay, I don't know what an ICQ is. Well, this is what it is, and try it out, and okay, and then next time you'll have more of an idea of it. So there's very much an idea of you don't have to know everything before you can try and put it into practice. You're teaching on day 2. You watch your tutor teach for day 1. You teach day 2, or perhaps day 3. So you're immediately thrown into the deep end. But I think that is a really powerful way to learn because you really viscerally understand what you need to know. You viscerally understand what you didn't know before. So, at the point when someone says you need to give good instructions, you go, yeah, of course. And you need to be clear and succinct. Yeah, of course, that's so obvious. And it's when you're in front of people and you're trying to do that you go, oh, it's actually a lot harder than it seems. And I am, and so then you've got a real reason to go back the next time and think, right, okay, maybe it's a good idea for me to try and script this. Maybe it's a good idea for me to practice this.
Yeah.
Maybe I do need, it's not that easy. And I had problems last time because blah, blah, blah. So let me amend that this time and try again. And you probably still won't get it completely right, but you'll get it better, hopefully. And so I think that's the one thing, is that this meshing of practice and theory and practice, and it sort of moving forward together, not here's the theory, now do the practice. And the other thing is that you're doing something that's difficult and that puts you in a vulnerable space, with other people who are also doing that difficult thing and
Yeah.
being vulnerable. And so, that element of, yes, people are watching you and that's not nice, but then you're all able to talk about it together,
Yeah.
and you can help each other through it. And when you see somebody else teaching who's novice and you go, oh, well, maybe they do something great. And you go, oh, that's really good. That's how to do it. Or that's how I'm going to do it next time. Or, of course, they fall into the same holes that you fell into. And you go, yeah, I can see why that's a problem. And because I'm not so in the middle of it, I can really sort of think about it more easily. I'm not so panicked. So I think that group experience is very, very powerful for learning. And that's so that the video creation course that I runs on exactly the same kind of format, because I think it's so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. And we also have all those observation tasks too. Those
Mm-hmm.
are big too. And I have one more question. I want to know if you have any other tips that you'd like to share to get ready
Uh,
to, I don't know,
for,
enjoy CELTA. I don't know, you choose.
yeah, I guess the other thing that I would say to anybody who's doing CELTA is that your tutors are really on your side. They want you to do well. They want you to pass. They want you to learn as much as you can. And so it might not always feel like that. Sometimes, because as a tutor, you're often criticizing people. The night you're going to try and do it in a supportive way, it's obviously going to be constructive, but there is going to be a lot of, no, do it this way, not that way. And CELTA's quite a prescriptive course. There are 42 criteria that you have to, show that you can do. And I think it's always worth keeping in mind that, your tutor does want the best for you. They do know how to get you to leap through these hoops. The feedback that you get from them will be detailed and hopefully helpful and worth really spending some time looking at, trying to read the feedback carefully, thinking about what that means for your next lesson, trying to work on that feedback in your next lesson. And if at any point you don't understand what they meant, don't be afraid to ask. It's not a problem to ask your tutors. They're there to help you. You've paid them to help you, and they want to, So that, I think, is worth keeping in mind. It's easy to get into a frame of mind, especially if you're a bit disappointed about a lesson that's gone badly, or maybe even if you failed a lesson, you think, oh, they'll hate me and I'm just doing badly. They don't. They really want the best for you. Read that feedback. Try and distance yourself from it, because it's really hard not to take it personally. Nobody likes getting bad feedback, negative feedback. Nobody likes that. I don't either. But you have to kind of try and distance yourself. Try not to take it personally. Try to take it on the chin and really think about, well, what do I have to do next time to be different, to work on those things? And ask your tutor if you're not sure. I quite often get people who email me spontaneously saying, I just don't understand. And I see the person to ask is your tutor. They're there to help you.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Definitely.
that's, I suppose, another thing to consider.
Definitely. Yes. And well, those were all the questions I had. I don't know if there's something else you'd like to share.
No, I guess, I suppose, what the other thing to keep in mind perhaps is that it's an initial qualification. It does have a really good reputation, has a great reputation. And so people often sort of think, oh, I've got CELTA and that's it. And it really is, and it's a 120-hour course. It's very short. It's an initial teaching qualification. And what you need to think about then is what you want to do to continue to develop after the course, and that might be excuse me, looking other things that are out there. There's lots and lots of material to help you develop. lots of stuff on my site, for example. I send out a newsletter every week that's got hopefully helpful stuff in. You just have to sign up on the site for any of the free courses and you'll be on my mailing list. Thinking about your colleagues and asking them, observing other lessons, trying to teach as many different kinds of classes as you can, seeing it as an ongoing development journey, because it's a great job. I have loved English teaching for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's been really good to me. I know it can be a really exploitative industry. It's not always good for people. I've been very lucky, I think. But I've had an enormous amount of joy from my career, and so I'm always really happy to introduce people into it. I feel it's a lucky, nice environment.
I mean, you definitely enjoy what you do, and I mean, I think you share that with other people. At least that's what happened to me when I found you on YouTube, and you were talking about all these things you can do in the classroom, and I was like, I want to do that. So, yeah.
I think the creativity of it, isn't it? I mean, it's a lovely job because it's so creative. Not always. I mean, like I've been, I say, very lucky in my career, and I know not everybody's in this position. But you can often be in a position where you're teaching, I don't know, simple past, but how you teach that, the context you teach that in, is very much dependent on you and the learners, and you can make it interesting for them, and hopefully interesting for you too, and make it an enjoyable experience, and give people a love of the language, because it's you're teaching a skill, not content. So you've got often quite a bit of freedom.
Absolutely, yeah, that's true. That's cool. Well, Jo, thank you very much for joining me today. Really,
it's been a delight. Thank you so much for having me.